I just hope we're able to get Amy online. We seem to be having a few issues getting her online. I'm really sorry for this. Uh, just a couple more minutes. We should get started. I'm not sure if it's the network. Hopefully, fingers crossed, she should come online now. We've been at it for the last 10 minutes. Okay, I think it's the network because I really think it's the network. Oh,
There
there
we
we go.
go.
Yay!
Yeah.
Finally, I had my fingers and my toes crossed as well.
I know. I was like, oh, it's always supposed to be easy, but then it isn't.
I know sometimes, and again, it's the network. I think so too, Amy. But anyway,
Yes.
I'm glad you made it online onto a
Yay.
platform. Thank you so much. A big, big, big
Absolutely.
welcome to Amy Taylor Alpers from the Pilates Center in Boulder, Colorado. Amy and
Thanks for
Rachel
having.
set up the Pilates Center, and they're popularly known as the Taylor Sisters.
Yes.
They worked with Romana, who was a prodigy of Joseph Pilates. And yeah, so we're so glad to have Amy on our platform today. So Amy is going to talk about her experience with Romana, setting up of the Pilates Center in Boulder, and of course the Teachers Training Program, which is one of the most distinguished classical certifications in the world. So welcome to our viewers too, and welcome again, Amy. So how are you today? Good
Everyone.
morning, by the way. It's 9.
Good morning. It is morning here. Yes.
Okay, okay. So yeah, we could get started. So
Yes.
basically, I'm sure the viewers, this part of the world would like to hear a little bit about your experience training with Romana. So if you could just throw some light onto that, please.
Yes. Yes. It's funny because when my sister moved to New York in 1987, I think it was, and we both decided at that point, because I'd been there already since 76, that we wanted to study Pilates, and we didn't really know enough about Pilates to know exactly who to study with or how to get in touch with anybody. And we're not really sure because we had read articles about Corolla, and I had friends who knew Kathy Grant, and somehow or other, though, we ended up with Romana. And I think the only reason that occurred probably because maybe we looked up Pilates in the phone book,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the only Pilates. So we just started there. We really didn't know what to expect. We weren't even thinking of necessarily becoming teachers. We were both dancers and dance teachers,
Right.
and most were just looking to get healthy and find out about this stuff that we'd
Mm-hmm.
heard about. Because in the dance world, you would often hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
We started with Romana, and just right away, she kind of reminded us of two people. One was our mom, because she was exactly the same age as our mom,
Okay.
born in June of 1923. And so there was like this auto connect. Plus, she
Mm-hmm.
also was a ballet teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And she reminded us of many of our ballet teachers throughout the years.
Okay.
Um, so we just, it just felt like a really nice connection right away. And we studied in her studio for about 2.5 years
Mm-hmm.
with all her teachers. She would be there for stretches, and then she had half a dozen other teachers who helped. And we were just, feeling the effects of Pilates and really enjoying it, and just being clients, which was so nice to just be a student and a client and not have any other agenda. But then this one strange day happened, which was April Fool's Day, 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to have my typical lesson, and the studio was closed. It was gone.
Okay.
And suddenly, realized, like, oh my God, like I need this. I need this.
Uh-huh.
This can't just disappear. So I immediately called Rachel, and then I was working at the Library and Museum for Performing Arts at Lincoln Center at the time. And
Uh-huh.
I had also, my other interest was dance. I had a master's in dance history. And we went back to the library and looked her name up, which was kind of, complicated last name, but
Okay.
she was in the phone book.
Mm-hmm.
So called her and she said, don't worry, honey, we will reopen. And probably about a week later, maybe they
Mm-hmm.
reopened. And that was when they actually kind of established themselves at Drago's gym in New York, which is where they were till she died.
Yeah.
And there was another location for a brief period of time too. But because it felt so um, uncountable, like it could just
Right.
disappear so quickly, and that was a moment in time when it could have kind of disappeared.
Okay.
Um, and don't really know. I just assumed there was probably a lease problem or financial problems or something.
Right.
Um,
But this is the same studio that she inherited from Joseph, correct?
yeah, exactly. So she
Yeah.
had probably started, I think, teaching at the studio post Joe's death. I think it was like late 70s, early 80s, and they
Okay.
had been in one location. I started in what was their second location, which was somewhere on the east side of New York, like 56th and 3rd, something like this. And then they moved to Drago's gym.
Okay.
That was on 57th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they were. But because it felt so kind of fly by night, I immediately went up to the owner next time I
Yeah.
saw him, and his name was Wee Tai Home. He was a
Yeah.
Korean student of Ramana's who owned it, and said, hey, I think I want to learn how to teach this. Is there
Uh,
some kind of program I could take?
right.
And also I want to get a reformer because I
Mm-hmm.
knew I was going to be moving out of New York shortly. And I thought, well, I better do this now. So he said that, there wasn't really anything formal, but there was a
Mm-hmm.
2 week long, $500 thing that we could buy, which was like, you have access to Ramana,
Right.
so you would come during her times when she was there, and you would observe her and get some lessons, and then just have the opportunity to ask her questions, etc. So it was very, very informal, and
Okay.
there was nothing else,
Yeah.
but that was it, and we didn't know any difference. And so
Mm-hmm.
yay, we were very excited to do that. And there wasn't really a test or anything. We kind of had to go down to NYU and do this thing with Ramana and Witai, and that was considered our test.
Mm-hmm.
And we did get a certificate,
Uh-huh.
which was very valuable to have,
Yeah.
because
And I
we were.
remember you mentioning during one of the, my visits to Boulder that she signed off on a piece of paper.
Yes,
That was actually the certificate, you
that was
know.
it. With a simple little piece of paper, it said,
Yeah.
yes, we completed this.
Right.
Ramana's name on it, Witai's name on it. We were like, yes.
Okay.
Uh, and in the meantime, also, I had ordered a reformer from Witai,
Okay.
which, we were moving to Boulder after that. So that was like the end of July, 89. And
Okay.
then moved to Boulder in the next few months.
Yeah.
And the reformer never came. And it was a constant struggle back and forth with Witai to find out what was going on with that. And finally, he wasn't able to actually provide that reformer. So
Mm-hmm.
he suggested that there was a guy coincidentally in Boulder who was making reformers, and they were a little less expensive. He could get me 2 for 1.
Okay.
And in the end, he was only able to get me 1. And so that remaining money, that like 3,000 was, I think, the original amount, and then 1,500 for the reformer he actually did get me. So for the other 1,500 that he still owed me, I asked him if it would be okay if
Mm-hmm.
we opened a studio and called it the Pilates Center. And
Okay.
he said, okay. And so that was how, it was all just like, we didn't know what any of it meant. We didn't know what difference it would make, how long
Yeah.
anything would last, etc.
Right.
We had a reformer, and we decided to open a studio.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure once you kind of, certified, and probably the next thing was you to actually start teaching Pilates.
Yeah. Yes.
But Amy, what prompted Rachel and you to actually start a teacher's training program?
Yeah, yes. So we opened our studio in Boulder in like November of 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And then, am I saying that right? Yes. The previous June, I had gone back to New York,
Mm-hmm.
and I had met a man through Romana whose name was Steve Giordano, and he made equipment.
Yeah.
And equipment at that time was a big secret. Like
Right.
you really couldn't find equipment that easily. Now, we didn't know, having come from the New York school,
Yeah.
anything really about the California stuff,
Yeah.
so that just wasn't even in our awareness.
Yeah.
But so as far as we knew, if I couldn't get a reformer from Weetai, how did you get equipment? And
Yeah.
so I happened to be in the studio one day when Steve walked in, and he had a spine corrector. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, Romana, does he build equipment? And she said, oh, yeah, so she introduced me to Steve. And I told him, we were thinking of opening a studio in Boulder. And he said, well, I'll come out and I'll build your equipment for you. I was
Okay.
like, oh, okay. So Steve came out. He was just a jack of all trades. He was kind of Romana's right hand at the time. He was helping her with a lot of trying to get things organized in New York
Mm-hmm.
a little more formally around
Okay.
teacher training. He was a student of hers.
Mm-hmm.
And just one of those guys who had many skills.
Okay.
And so he came to Boulder. He helped us set up our studio. And then after the studio was set up, he was like, I think we need to work on a teacher training program. And
Mm-hmm.
he was doing this in New York with Romana at the same time. So it was all the same thing, really. It
Right.
was Romana and Steve and Rachel and me in Boulder, and Romana and Steve and Sean Gallagher in New York. And
Okay.
it all came kind of from the same source.
Uh-huh.
So we sat down with Steve and we created a program that basically hasn't really changed in terms of the actual, the way it's organized, the steps you have to go through, the testing process, etc. Basically
Right.
it was a pretty complete thing from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first that we knew of.
Yeah.
And Ramon came out and helped us teach it for the first couple years.
Okay.
Uh, and then, then the trademark litigation kind of
Yeah.
erupted, and things went crazy after that. But we'd already
Yeah.
established, so it was, it all just happened in a way like we didn't even know what it would all mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's just it all fell into place, and
It
today
did.
you are where you are. So I'd
Yeah.
love for you to talk to us a little about, you've had such a flourishing journey along with Rachel, in growing TPC and with LTTs and host studios around the world.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
can you just talk a little about that to us, Amy?
Yes, absolutely. Like at the beginning, we had one program. It
Yeah.
was A to Z, everything, and that was all you could take. And you had to travel
Right.
to Boulder to get it, right?
Yeah.
Because, it was a new industry at that point. Like as anything larger than a couple little studios around the world,
Yeah.
it was just beginning to formulate itself as a bit more of an industry, a little bit more professional, and teacher training was just starting.
Yeah.
And so, the expectation was, there were only a couple programs and you had to go where the program was. And that's,
Yeah.
the world has changed dramatically since 1990, as we know, so those 30 years have seen huge things. At that point, it was all on paper,
Yeah.
letters I wrote to Romana, handwritten on stationery.
Mm-hmm.
So it was different times, and it's hard sometimes to actually remember that kind of thing. It was just the expectations were quite different.
Yeah.
So we had our, 1 year long advanced, it was called advanced at the time. It was just the program.
Yeah.
And that went very well for 10 years, maybe, like as the industry began to expand a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So then the trademark litigation kind of consumed the 90s a little bit. Sean Gallagher bought the trademark in 92 and then,
Right.
you know, started basically trying to get some kind of control. And
Yeah.
we sort of superseded him because we had this agreement with the previous owner who
Okay.
had sold to Sean.
Yeah.
And so we just kept on going, but the industry stayed kind of small
Hmm.
because of the legal issues.
Yeah.
But then October 2000, the trademark was determined to be generic, right? And we were very, very involved with that. We were deposed. We were, you know, I went to New York and testified. So there was, you know, we were always extremely woven into whatever was happening in the story at the time.
Right.
And then in October of 2000, it became generic and the industry just kind of, the floodgates opened and things went
Yeah.
quite crazy for a while.
Yeah.
But you know, then you started to see that there was teacher training anywhere and people didn't feel like they had to travel anymore. You
Yeah.
know, like I could just go down the street. There's a teacher training program there. Why should I travel?
Right.
So we started having a number of our grads who'd already been, you know, studio owners and whatever for years now,
Yeah.
saying to us, hey, could we offer your program where you are and where
Right.
they are, you know, because they were having trouble in their own location getting people to be willing to go to Boulder. So
Yeah.
that was the first evolution we had to deal with, was like, all right, the industry is changing, people, the market is changing. How are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to stay available and accessible? So
Yeah.
we started with about 7, I think, of our graduates who had studios, most in the United States, but in Canada and in Dubai, which is how I met you,
Yeah.
and a couple other locations like that.
Right.
There was one in London and one in Paris.
Mhm.
Eventually there was.
Yeah.
And so we went on like that for quite a while. So that was our licensed studio model.
Right.
But it had great things about it, but it also had a couple things we didn't really like that really went very much against our mission of peace in the world,
Yeah.
you know, because
Hmm.
it set up a little bit of a competitive edge. It gave a particular graduate the right to a level of ownership in a certain area, and it just
Right.
created some friction. And so we came up with another design that
Hmm.
is the one we use today. We still have a couple licensed studios because they're
Right.
just awesome and they just keep on rolling.
Yeah.
But we have now what we call our host advisor situation, where we have any graduate anywhere who comes back to us and trains to support our teacher training program where they are,
Yeah.
can be an advisor to someone
Yeah.
locally, right? And
Yeah.
then 7 years ago,
Yeah.
just the amazing brain of Kelly Burkhalter Hutchins, who's our director of education now and has been, she was like, we have to put the lectures online. And of
Right.
course, you know, it was still not the thing yet. It was
Yeah.
still early days
Yeah.
for online education. And we were like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I don't know. But it turned out to just be the best, one of the best decisions we've ever made. So we filmed all the lectures, just Rachel and me with a client,
Yeah.
one exercise at a time, up close and personal, very well done, very professionally done,
Yeah.
so that we could have students all around the world who could access the basically the textbook
Yeah.
information online and see it
Yeah.
again, and they'd have 24-hour access to it versus how we used to do it, which was 2 weekends of live lectures where you just crammed and
Yeah.
you know you got and then it was over. So it turned out, like, on so many levels, to be a phenomenal choice.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we just started growing our host advisor organization. So we probably, I wish I had the numbers for you now, but over 100
Yeah.
host advisors and a dozen, maybe what we call our licensed teachers, not the licensed studios, but the licensed teachers who have
Teachers.
done
Yeah.
additional work to
Yeah.
be able to even do the testing and all of that, you know,
Right.
so that we have a little army of peace warriors out there
Yeah.
facilitating our students through programs all around the world. And I mean, it's just been amazing. It constantly kind of like, oh, you know, you have to stop and take stock sometimes because
Yeah.
it all just happens and you don't always, you know, take time to take a deep breath and appreciate it all.
Yeah. No, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that, I decided and eventually heeded to what Kelly, advised me to introduce a teachers training program in India. It's 3 years now. And
Yes.
we've had like
Amazing.
7 graduates, and we do have 2 more in the program. I think that's
Yeah.
the best thing that I did for myself and my studio
Yes.
here in India. And
Yes.
it's such a comprehensive program, and it's so
Yes.
all rounded, so
Yes.
which makes it extremely unique. Because I have a lot of inquiries where people come and ask me, hey, don't you do short-term programs? Because I think lately, over the last few years, balanced body has gotten into India in a big way, in a big way,
Yeah.
but they give
Yes.
these short-term modules.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
have people asking me, hey, why don't you guys plan on working this way? And I'm
Yes.
like, you know what? Uh, doesn't work,
It
because
doesn't work. It really
it
doesn't.
doesn't work. Yeah, you want to
You
teach
never,
Pilates. First of all, you need to be really passionate about this movement practice to be able to teach it. And if you're
yeah.
just looking on to piling certifications, it's not for you. I mean, you really need to, think about it, a little more
It,
deeply before you
it,
actually
it really
can
is a
decide to do it.
system, you know? You can't
Yeah,
like pull the system apart. You
yeah,
can teach bits of it, but
yeah,
then that's what you end up with is a lot of bits and parts, like a bunch of exercises on a bunch of pieces of equipment. And
right.
then, then you're just very much inclined to just start creating anything on
Yeah,
all kinds of equipment. And pretty soon Pilates is, fit balls and therabands and all kinds of stuff. And it's like
yeah,
there there is a method,
yeah,
very specific,
yeah,
completely organized,
yeah,
and created by a unique man.
right.
And we are very committed to what we learned about Joe Pilates through Ramana
Yeah,
specifically, and at
yeah,
the beginning of the industry, let's say for the first 15 of the last 30 years,
yeah,
that was all there really kind of was. There was Ramana
yeah,
said, or one of
yeah,
the elders said, but
yeah,
then we started having access to a lot more of the archival material and
right.
beginning to see what Joe actually did live, like being able to
Yeah,
see film footage of him and film footage of him teaching, etc., and photos. He was very, very much into film and photos. So
yeah,
there is quite a lot of archival material to help us really know
yeah,
what he taught and what he didn't teach,
yeah,
and how it was put together in a true method. And
correct.
so we chose at the very beginning a couple things. One was we weren't going to teach chunks,
Right.
and we weren't going to teach it by equipment.
Yeah,
We really felt like you needed to feel like you entered the system to learn to teach it in the same way you would as a client,
yeah,
right? So we felt like our level 1 material needed to include all of the various pieces of
yeah,
Pilates equipment,
yeah,
literal Pilates equipment, nobody else's.
yeah,
Um, so that you understood here's where you begin, and you fill in all your gaps at this level
yeah,
before you move forward into a higher level, because you're establishing such deep skills at this point. Whereas
right.
if you just learn mat or
Yeah,
learn reformer, you
yeah,
don't really see the systematic development
yeah,
of the skills in a human
yeah,
that bring it back to life, that really slowly, step by step, very intentionally
yeah,
rebuild this body.
yeah,
So that was huge to us, and that you had to understand it as a system, as an entire method, but you had to
Right.
be able to then build it from the base
Right.
so that body would just evolve with you. Like you could understand that when Pilates started designing this work,
Yeah.
right? He just started with what a person could do. And then
Yeah.
as they could do more, he evolved more.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he already had this whole routine set and he
Hmm.
put a person through it. It was just
Right.
watching a body evolve from whatever condition it was in when it came
Yeah.
to health.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm so glad, we got to speak about this, Amy, because it's so important, for people to understand that when it comes to Pilates, it involves, all of the equipments that was traditionally used by Joseph is what it is that one needs to practice on and as well as teach. Because I
Yes.
often get on, asked this question. So do you do reformer Pilates? And I'm like, well, reformer is just one of those equipments that we use in the
Yes.
classical
Yes.
repertoire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of it a little bit like, because a lot of people don't have equipment, so they're mat certified. And I've always
Yeah.
thought, that's problematic. It's not that the mat can't stand alone, it can, but I think the evolution of the system was he had no equipment, he was
Yeah.
working with people, and he very clearly began to see I need to have something that they can do that will
Right.
support them. So one
Yeah.
day I could actually not use the equipment and just do the mat. So it was like the
Yeah.
mat by itself
Yeah.
doesn't quite give you everything you need to be able to
Yeah.
do the mat well.
Right.
Yeah,
So thank you so much for answering that question, Amy. Now, moving
absolutely.
on, we get a lot of queries from people who have full-time jobs and,
Yeah,
you know,
yes.
clients of mine per se, and they want to be able to get into the program while holding on to their full-time job or maybe even part-time. So
Yeah,
what would you advise to such people if they want
yeah,
to get into the program? What would your
yeah.
advice be?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the other evolutions that happened that was very much market driven at a time, like in the early
Hmm.
2000s when the industry went crazy and all these programs popped up and all these
Yeah.
options were available, we realized that our entire program was a lot for people. So we created an intermediate program, meaning just the first half of the program, right? So
Right.
here's the whole program, but you could take this chunk and then this chunk.
Yeah.
And then we kind of realized like this chunk wasn't quite good enough. So we sort of like offset it. We made a slightly bigger first chunk and a smaller second
Yeah.
chunk. So, and all of those options still exist. So somebody
Yeah.
can start with fewer hours, a little less material, still
Yeah.
all the equipment, but just
Yeah.
not all the way to the super advanced material.
Yeah.
So that was kind of step one, a little
Right.
bit of trying to evolve the program to make it a little more accessible to people who didn't have the time or the money or whatever.
Right.
But going online, the actual creating of the lectures online, I think was the biggest thing to facilitate people who are working, other jobs at the same time,
Other jobs.
because it's not like just you have to come to the lectures,
Yeah.
these 2 weekends. It's that you have access to that material
Yeah.
24/7, right? So you
Yeah.
can do almost all your study on a weekend or
Yeah.
in the evenings, whatever's
Yeah.
convenient for you. And then we
Yeah.
also at some point realized like, okay, there are a lot of people who really want to do this, but they do have
Yeah.
limitations. So the original 12-month program became 18 months. So you
Yeah.
could stretch it out a little bit. And also
Yeah.
you can always buy extensions. Like we're not into somebody rushing their way through and getting
Yeah.
done fast,
Yeah.
there has to be an end.
Yeah.
And many people have the luxury to just dive in and just go straight through, and it can work easily in a year to do the whole program. But
Yeah.
if you do have other responsibilities, then, you know, you need a little more flexibility. So buying extensions, it's totally affordable. It just continues the clock like it never came to an end.
Right.
And there's, you know, there's so many variations out there on the type of student. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, people get pregnant or they have family traumas or all sorts of things, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, you want to make sure you actually have a product and you can complete it, you know,
Yeah.
but you also want to be flexible so that people can do it regardless of their situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I tell most of the inquiries that come to me regarding the program, that, you know,
Yeah.
it's easy because, you know, you do have that 12-month period, and as long as you stay within your hours and you keep up to it, it's
Yes.
not hard. I mean, I did that, you know, because when I
Yeah.
got into the program, I had a full-time job. So, and I used to ensure that I at least got in about 2 hours of, you know, observations or any other internship hours
Yes.
during the week, and probably spend a lot more over the weekend to make up
Yes.
for my hours. But
Yes.
great. Thank you so much for answering that question, Amy. Now
Absolutely.
going on, you know, I know Rachel and you have stayed really true to the classical method. And
Yes.
I really love that quote of yours where you say that I feel very strongly that if you haven't done the classical method, you haven't really learned Pilates.
I think
So,
it's absolutely true. You know, I mean,
yeah,
it's a shame. It's, you know, you can do amazing work. There's other work
yeah,
out there that's amazing, and it's not really the quality of the work necessarily. It's that
yeah,
Pilates is a very specific thing created by a very unique man,
yeah,
and not everything is Pilates, you
yeah,
know. And if you haven't actually studied his work, with the systematic quality to it, the very organized, very developmental, progressive way that it takes your body from, you know, almost from below zero all the way to very, very high end,
yeah,
then you don't really know what it is you're doing. You're teaching a series of exercises, you know,
yeah,
maybe it's not a series, it's just a bunch of exercises, and you don't even necessarily exactly know if the equipment is quite right either,
yeah,
because I think so much of what caused Pilates to kind of become so many things is
yeah,
because someone said, oh, I could build one of those, and they
yeah,
built a reformer or something, but it wasn't exactly the same. So then, you know, we would have that with students all the time. They'd come and they'd take the workshops and they'd try the exercises, and then they'd go back and they had different equipment, and it was like, it doesn't work on that equipment
right,
because so much of the other equipment didn't really understand the intention
yeah,
of things. For instance, the size, the placement of the foot bar, the boxes that sit on the reformer. There's so many things, even just the
right,
width of the pole systems, etc., you know, that are, they're designed very specifically to be human. They're
yeah,
not designed necessarily for creativity, you
yeah,
know, oh, you could do it this way and this way and this way and this way. No, it's intentionally trying to put the human back together in a way that it enables its natural function.
yeah,
And so just teaching it stuff is not actually the goal. It's not
yeah,
about being creative with movement. It's really
yeah,
about, you know, systematically putting your body back the way it's supposed to be so it remains
yeah,
healthy and continues on without aggravating itself and etc., you know. So it's just a
right,
different paradigm, literally a
yeah,
different paradigm, but it can look very similar, you know. So
mhm,
it can be quite challenging sometimes for certainly the novice or the person who doesn't know to
correct,
have any sense of what it is they're looking at. So
yeah,
you know, after 30 years or 30 plus years now of doing
mhm,
Pilates, the brilliance of it never ceases to amaze me.
yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just
I
ongoing,
completely agree
like,
with that. Yeah,
yeah. And like,
yeah,
you know, at the beginning, there's a little like, put some trust into this because you
yeah,
don't really understand it. But then years
yeah,
go by and you're like, oh my God, that was so brilliant that he did that before that. And, you
Yeah.
know, that the equipment was just like this because, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
And Rachel and I, from the start, one of the things we knew was when we left New York and we came to Boulder,
Yeah.
that was a very intentional decision too, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
back in the 80s. I mean, New York was a difficult place, you know,
Yeah.
and Boulder has always been a little bit of a refuge,
Yeah.
but it's also a very open-minded place and a very educated place, etc. So we knew it could be a great place for Pilates, but we knew
Right.
we weren't going to teach it the way we'd been taught it,
Right.
meaning with kind of that little bit of that New York, what would I say? You know, unpleasantness sometimes, but also just the unwillingness to give very much. You know,
Right.
like for us, it was so important that we actually share the
Yeah.
knowledge, give it to people,
Yeah.
help people
Yeah.
actually reap the benefits of it, not
Yeah.
covet it for ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
so we started right away with this intention and this mission that it really, as Pilates himself intended, is
Right.
designed for world peace. And you have to
Yeah.
teach it from that mentality
Yeah.
for it to, I don't know, get deep in your body and change
Yeah.
your whole spirit, you
Yeah.
know? And
Plus,
it's
I
not
think being,
in
yeah.
hardcore.
Yeah. And being compassionate when you teach Pilates matters a lot, because
Yes.
I think that is really, really important.
I mean, we
And
felt that
that's something that
undeniable.
I really love. I mean, my first visit to Boulder, I mean, it was a different world altogether. I was just blown away. I mean, I just love
Yeah,
the way the teachers kind of, they were so ever willing to, answer your questions, and
exactly.
that never ceases to amaze me. I mean, they were so supportive, so compassionate, and I would say probably that was, which actually really made me fall in love with this movement practice and decide for
Yeah.
myself, to say
Yes.
this is what I want to be able to do for the rest of my life.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I mean, like,
yeah,
as a
yeah,
dancer in New York, you know, you were kind
yeah.
of used to that nasty teacher way that could be, you know. Um, and, and so we didn't, you know, that didn't bother us. But when we came to
Right.
Boulder, we knew these are not dance students who are used to being, you know, barked at. And
Yeah.
we didn't want to. We both, Rachel and I, had been ballet teachers as well, and we didn't teach ballet that
Right.
way either, you know.
Right.
So we knew we had this opportunity to take this incredible thing, this amazing method,
Yeah.
and teach it from our, you know, our hearts and
Yeah.
our belief system that, you know, it needs to have compassion, it needs to have collaboration, it needs to have openness,
Right.
a willingness to share, to
Yeah.
go on a journey with somebody instead of just teach them how to do Pilates. Like teaching somebody how to do Pilates, we
Yeah.
quickly realized that was actually not our
Yeah.
interest. You know, yes, that looks like what you're doing. It looks like you're
Yeah.
teaching people how to do Pilates, but really you're just utilizing this amazing tool, this amazing method to facilitate healing in
Yeah.
a human in every way you can possibly imagine that. And that's what I mean, for 30 years, it's just endlessly intriguing and interesting. And then like with the advent of needing to go online more, and we've been
Right.
doing like Zoom and Skype lessons, private
Yeah.
lessons and classes for
Yeah.
years now.
Right.
And you know, just being able to touch people all around the world. And
Yeah.
I was immediately amazed doing some Skype privates, was like, oh my gosh, I can still see, I can still help people with very subtle issues in their unique body, you know,
Yeah.
and it just amazes me how well it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. I'm just
Yeah.
going to be a little conscious about the time, just to tell
Yeah.
those who have joined us today. If they have any questions, please send them on. If we can, we'll answer them online. or we could always post answers via stories. Now, I'm
Yes.
just going to have one more question for you, Amy.
Mhm.
I get asked this question quite often. Is Pilates for men? Um,
Ah,
so,
that's when you know
and
Joe is like going, "What?"
yeah. So
It was
yesterday I
crazy.
was on a live chat, and so I think when Pilates actually came into India, it got to be very popular with the film fraternity. So they saw a lot of actresses doing Pilates, and so they thought it's a woman thing. So
Yes,
men
yes,
don't actually do Pilates because you don't break into a sweat, etc., etc. So I'm sure we'd love
yeah.
to hear that from you.
Yes, yes. I think, it's just because dancers found Pilates, early on with Joe in New York, and it was obviously so great for them.
Yeah,
And it kept them dancing, much longer. And then it was also an awesome transitional career.
yeah,
So, and dancers already know how to teach movement, they
yeah,
understand movement. So that it made sense that dancers really did love
yeah,
this work. And all of the elders that we
yeah.
know of basically were all dancers, right? So it stayed in the dance world,
Mm-hmm.
which is, all the elders, all but one, were also female. So
Yeah,
it got that reputation of being for females and mainly even for dancers. And the more I study it and the more I look back at all the archival work and the archival films and see how clearly male the system actually is,
yeah,
in that for women, it does this amazing thing where it could build a lot of the musculature that we don't tend to want to build or think we
right.
need to build in the upper body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened is that because it was women who carried the work on, a lot of
Yeah,
that work kind of disappeared.
yeah,
So we have a lot more of the leg work, lying around and moving the legs in space. But actually, there was so much more fitness type, get your body big and strong and healthy, and make it powerful.
yeah,
But it didn't get brought down through the years that way. And so
yeah,
when it did become popularly known, it
yeah.
already had this dancer slash women reputation. But Joe was very clear. He
Right.
made it for men. He wanted men as clients. He was a boxer.
Yeah,
It was designed from a boxer mind and not a dancer mind at all, a very male boxer mind.
yeah,
But the women who teach it would need to kind of get re-taught with that mindset to be able to pull that aspect of the work out again.
yeah,
Just there's so much more arm work and upper body work in the
yeah,
work,
yeah,
but can kind of dance around it a little bit because your clientele maybe don't want it or they don't like it, or
yeah,
etc. But no, it's very, very male, and I think we've seen an increase
yeah.
in male teachers, but also just in male clients. I think,
Right.
they do begin to realize, like, this is actually healthy for
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
I'm not hurting myself, but
yeah,
I can still maintain my
yeah,
strength.
yeah,
And oh my gosh, I sweat like crazy with every Pilates lesson, so you kind of
yeah,
know if you're not, when you first start with Pilates as a new client, right? You start kind of slowly because you're making sure you're not going to be hurting anything, etc., and that you're taking care of the person. But soon enough, it should be pretty fitnessy.
yeah,
Um, that's a commitment on the teacher or the studio owner's part for sure to keep it that way.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, for all those men out there who have this question,
Yes.
if Pilates is for them, it is definitely, definitely for you. So,
Totally.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yes.
So, I mean,
Yes.
that was really interesting, Amy. I think we're running out of time. So,
Okay.
if we do, I don't see any questions in there currently, but I'm sure we'll have them coming on. So, but however, it was such a lovely conversation that we had with you today,
Yeah,
Amy, and thank you
absolutely.
so much. It was, a pleasure to have you, on board with us.
I'm
And
glad it worked out so well
yeah,
too,
no, I know
like, all right,
eventually, after initially we had those little bit of glitches, but it all worked
yeah,
out fine. Uh,
yes, yeah,
a big thank you to all our viewers as well who have joined us in this conversation with Amy Taylor Alpers today. And
yes,
you have any questions, please send them on. Do
yeah,
follow our stories to see what we have coming up next in our Wellbeing
great.
Weekend. And
Yep,
yeah, and we do
join
have
us.
this video saved on IGTV. So those of you who have joined us late, yeah, I think there was something about thank you, interesting chat. I'm a student and love to hear more about the background. Sorry, I think you got into this chat a lot later, but
Yeah,
we do have it saved on IGTV. So please
yes,
look it up there. And a big thank you again, Amy. Lovely seeing you and lovely chatting with
you
you.
too,
And you have,
absolutely.
yeah, you have a good rest of the day and the weekend. And I hope to see you soon in Boulder.
I know, I can't wait to get on a plane and start going places again.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
hopefully
don't know
San
when
Diego.
I'm going to be able to get my feet into the US next, but
Yeah,
again, fingers crossed. Uh,
yes,
yeah, but thank you so much for all those Zoom lessons online. They're really great.
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, just
Yep,
to keep Pilates practice up.
it's amazing. It works great.
It does, it does. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, and bye
Okay,
now. Yeah,
bye.
bye. Bye.